Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Tales from the Fandom. We are into the month of February, and today I am joined by a guest that I have been waiting almost the entire year to talk to. And if you think that's weird, because we're in February, we're actually recording in December, but that's okay. I am joined with Ellie, and you might know Ellie on Instagram as EG.Cosplay. Ellie, how are you doing today?
I am great. How are you doing today?
I am doing well. I actually scrolled back through your Instagram because with people that I find on Instagram, I like to try and track down like what was it that was the first indication of, oh, I really want to talk to this person about their fandoms. And of course you do cosplay, so you have a number of different fandoms that you represent.
I do.
And I went all the way back to, I believe you had done a Ray cosplay that had
Oh
caught my
yeah.
attention
Yep.
back in like February of 2020, and I was like, oh, that's my first like on her page.
Oh, was it really? That is so funny. Was it? I wonder which one it was. Was it the one where I had first made the post about the costume?
You know what? I think it's the actually completed. There's like a row of three or four
Oh,
pictures.
yeah, yeah, the photo shoot. That was a good one.
Yes, so that was the first one. I was like, okay, we'll go from
Ah,
there.
very interesting.
I remember your when I sent or got your email address, it was the University of Central Florida email address, and I was like, "Oh, my wife works at
Oh
UCF."
yes. Oh my gosh, I completely forgot we even had that conversation. Yeah, and then we were talking about like go Knights and the whole football team. Oh my gosh, that is so funny. That conversation literally feels like a year ago because it was a year ago.
Yeah, but I mean, by the time this episode comes out, I think it'll be like almost officially about a year since I had invited you, and but we're talking in December, so it's all good.
Yes. Yes.
But we are here to talk some fandom, and you have a number of great fandoms that I know that I am into and love, and it's always great, like when a guest that I have overlaps with my interest because it makes for a little bit better of a conversation. And I'm so happy to talk about this first one, which is Lord of the Rings.
Oh yeah, let's get into it.
Now, always with how I run this show is how did you get into Lord of the Rings? Are you a book person? Are you a movie person? Are you the animated movie person back from the 80s? Like where do you fall?
So a little bit of both. When I was younger, my mom used to work in the ICU, which meant that she had crazy hours, which meant I often got dropped at my aunt's house for quote babysitting. And my aunt had grown up with the books and the animated movies. So she had these like beautiful um hardcover copies of the original trilogy and of The Hobbit. Like it was like gold leaf on the outside, and like there were these beautiful illustrations in the book. And then she also had a vinyl record of the original soundtrack from the animated movie. And I used to listen to it and, just think that the songs were like fun because at that point I'm, like a 7-year-old kid. And I used to just stare at those gold leaf copies of the books and be like, I don't know what's inside, but I love it already. So by the time I was, old enough to kind of follow along while someone was reading it, I would beg her to read this book to me. And so we started with The Hobbit, and then we got into the original trilogy, and then I got my own copies and I would start rereading it. And I feel like, as my reading comprehension grew, I got more and more sucked into the books themselves. And then I don't think I watched the movies until a little bit later on, at which point I was like, you know what, I'm sold. I'm a fan for life. The way that they brought these stories to life in the movies is just so perfect. And I've been a fan ever since.
It is one of those things, especially being a book reader and then seeing the movies and just seeing the beauty of what they were able to accomplish doing the movies. It's just so beautiful.
I know. And just like the detail and seeing the places that you'd read so many times about brought to life on the screen and how real it looked. And it was also one of those amazing experiences where if you read a book first and then see a movie, you have your own concepts of what everything looks like in your mind's eye. And seeing, a lot of these places in the movies, it's just cool to see like what things lined up with how you imagined it versus how, Peter Jackson imagined it. And then as you continue on, those two visions kind of meld when you go back to reread the books after having watching the movies. And it's so magical seeing how real everything looked in those movies. I can never get enough. It's so good.
I know the one thing that always throws me off is like the books that I have is like a paperback box set from I think like the late 80s, and just looking at the character illustrations on the front cover
Yeah.
versus like looking at like Aragorn now or Gimli or
Hmm.
Legolas, and I'm like, they don't match
I
up at
know.
all.
It's like, thank you, Peter Jackson, for interjecting because this illustration is not something that would work well with like a Hollywood blockbuster. Or the whole thing about how Frodo is supposed to be like in his 40s when he's going on this whole expedition, and then you go to watch the movie and it's like little baby Elijah Wood with his baby blue eyes, and it's like that's not a 40-year-old hobbit, but I'm okay with the fact that it's not a 40-year-old hobbit. He's more endearing this way. I know exactly what you mean with those illustrations.
Exactly, exactly. And I know that the Hobbit movies themselves, separate from Lord of the Rings, that they get a little bit more criticism. There's
Mm.
the three of the movies, and sometimes like I know I rewatched them recently, and I was like, I like them now versus watching them in the theaters. I think they just felt a little bloated at times.
Mhm.
But then watching the animated Hobbit, I'm like, okay, you know what? I like that they still have that kind of like whimsy, and it's not as dark-ish as it you as like the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Yeah, yeah. No, I totally agree. I feel like The Hobbit is more like grandiose and feels a little bit more like a folk tale rather than a fairy tale. And I think that part of the problem with people giving the Hobbit trilogy a bad rap is twofold. A, they were wanting it to be just like how the original trilogy was. And that's just not realistic. Like, you can't redo something that great a second time,
Hmm.
realistically. But second, I think that they also kind of made the mistake of, oh my gosh, like we have access to all of this amazing animation now. We totally need to take advantage of it because if we had this when we were filming the original trilogy, like think of how much we could have done. And it's one of those examples of just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. Like,
Yes.
for example, not to name names, but if there were to be, say, a giant fight scene at the end of your trilogy, and you decided to animate an entire dwarf character where all the other dwarf characters were, I don't know, live action, that could be an example of doing something you shouldn't, even though you could. That was one thing where when I was watching like the finale to the Hobbit movies, I was like, why would you do that? Like, what, why? What's the rationale? Because it looked silly because everything else that's going on around you, all the characters are, a live action actor. And then there was just that one dwarf. I'm blanking on his name, but he was just like full body animation. So I think to that end, the Hobbit trilogy does kind of deserve the criticism in that way because it did kind of give it a different vibe. It felt a little bit more artificial and overwhelming at times. But then you go back and you watch it, keeping in mind like this isn't going to be an exact replica of the book, and you try to watch it for what it is and watch it as its own creation. And I think that you start to appreciate the detail that did go into it and be thankful that you have one in the first place and love it for what it is, not what it could have been, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Now, with the Lord of the Rings universe, Middle Earth essentially, number of different characters, whether it be elf, dwarf, human, hobbit, or other, because there are characters, there's just others out there. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
who's your favorite? Who do you love the most?
Hmm. If I had, ooh, this is a tough question because I love them all. They are all my sweet baby angels. I think they're all wonderfully written and different in their own way. Um, if I had to pick one that I maybe identify with most, it's probably Sam. I know that there's kind of been more of like a shift in pop culture to recognizing that like Sam in a way is the hero of this story, but I think that what I admire about him is his undying loyalty as a friend. I'm one of those people where, like, if we're standing out in the rain and it's soaking wet and I have a jacket and you don't, I would take the jacket off of me and have both of us huddle underneath it like a bird. Um, and so I really identify with the fact that everything in the world is totally falling apart. And Sam is like, it's up to me to help my friend carry this enormous burden. I don't care what it puts me through. I'm going to do this because I care about him and he needs me. So I really identify with Sam in that regard. And I think that he has a lot of inspirational quotes and he's so endearing, and that's a quality that I feel like ages really well regardless of what's going on. In terms of just like, hell yeah, that's a sick character, I'm gonna have to go with Gandalf. That part at the Battle of Helm's Deep where he just appears on the white horse at the top of that hill, like there has never been such a rush of endorphins in my life that when I first saw that scene on film, like I felt like it was the second coming of Jesus. Like my eyes were open and I was like, oh my God, we're saved. Like, thank God. And, everyone just starts rushing down the hill and just, that was the coolest scene ever. So Gandalf probably comes in a close second if I had to pick.
I have to say, like, I love Sam.
Mm.
Sam is my guy from all the way back to when they cast Sam, and I was like, oh, I love Sean Astin.
Yes, he was in the Goonies.
Yeah, he never says die, and
Yes,
Goonies never say die, and Sam never
exactly.
says die, and when I was going to make a Stranger Things reference, but he died in that one, so it
Yeah,
wouldn't work.
he
But
did say never die, but he kind of ended up doing it. We still appreciated him though. He was a wholesome character in Stranger Things, but
exactly,
he's a wholesome person. Sam is a wholesome person. It's just such a pleasure.
it is. I really loved, like, I love like the entire cast. They did wonders with who they cast and how like I was reading something the other day because The Witcher on Netflix is really popular. I'm not sure if you've seen that, but
Yes.
it tied into the story about the actor that plays the Witcher, and I'm blanking on his name right now.
Henry Cavill.
Henry Cavill. He had an interview where he talked about growing up watching the Lord of the Rings movies and hearing stories about how Viggo Mortensen wore his armor a lot for as a Strider or Aragorn, and would do like campouts to like kind of weather the armor, make it feel lived in, and wake up in the mornings and go fishing. And he said that he had been wearing his armor from The Witcher like to his house and doing activities and stuff, just so that way he could break his armor. And I
Oh
just thought like
goodness.
that was a great callback to
Yeah.
people growing up watching Lord of the Rings and just being like, this is amazing stuff.
Oh, I totally agree. And it's one of those things where, when you can see that other people then use that to inspire them as they continue into their own professional career, that just shows how it has such a special place in the pantheon of pop culture where, people from little old me to, all the way up to Henry Cavill take inspiration from the things that were accomplished in that original trilogy and the method acting that Vigo went through, and it's stuff that feels so special on top of the fact that the movies are so amazing that the actors were so invested in it.
Absolutely. Now, do you have, and I know this might be a tough question, but do you have a favorite movie of the three, either like of Lord of the Rings or of the Hobbits?
Hmm.
Is like, does one touch your heart more than the others?
I would probably say Fellowship, just because I love the Shire aesthetic more than anything. I think if I ended up in Middle Earth, I would absolutely be a hobbit. Just the
Yes.
whole concept of like eating food all the time and walking around without shoes, like that is like my peak essence, like it doesn't get better than that. And just like seeing the Shire come to life on film is just like it's so amazing to watch. It's just so idyllic and peaceful. And I think that, just getting a glimpse into what a perfect, happy version of Middle Earth looks like amidst all the doom and gloom. It's a very nice thing to see, and it's very calming. And I just love how they set up all these different characters and how they all, come together during that one scene with Elrond. And then, as the movies go on, it's a little bit different of a vibe because everyone's kind of off doing their own thing, but it's really special to see them all together in the first movie before things get like really, really intense, because there's so much like momentum to it, and seeing where everyone's coming from and setting up all of these different characters and lands within Middle Earth. I'd say that's why Fellowship is probably my favorite out of the six.
I love that you're like all for that Hobbit life because
Yes.
that is me to a T. Like, let me live under a hill. Let
Hmm.
me let me just like putter around and have like some good food and
Yes. All I'm asking is to have my own garden and not have to wear shoes. That's all I'm asking
exactly.
for.
And it's funny because you at least went to school down here in Florida, and it's like there's definitely a shoeless or at least with flip flop type of thing like
Hmm.
10 months out of the year.
Yeah, that's as close as you can get, as opposed to in Boston right now. The weather has just been so cold this week that I was wearing like two socks and a pair of boots, and I still lost feeling in my toes walking from like the shuttle to the front of my work building. And I think back to the Shire, and I think to myself, it's probably so warm there right now, and I bet none of them are wearing shoes, and everyone's gardens look amazing. And I'm over here wrapped up like an Eskimo.
Oh, absolutely. Now, before we switch off of Lord of the Rings, how excited are you for the Amazon Prime series that they're going to be doing?
Oh, I know. Okay. So I don't want to contemplate too much on the Amazon series. Reason being, I think that part of the lack of enthusiasm about the Hobbit movies is that everyone was anticipating it being a certain way, and everyone was reading all these things about they're doing this and they're doing that, and Martin Freeman, and getting too deep into what they should anticipate. So I'm trying to go into the Amazon series knowing absolutely nothing, not knowing who's going to be in it, not knowing what it's going to be about. And I just want to go into it with like a total blank canvas mind. That being said, I am so excited, even though I know literally nothing about it so far, because I have wanted them to expand upon the greater Tolkien writings for so long, because there is so much material that's just sitting there. And it's like, please use me. I'm here. I'm at your disposal. I'm magnificent. The people will love me. And the fact that someone is like finally taking the time to expand upon that, it's going to be so exciting, especially where we live in this world right now where everything is a remake or a reboot. I think it's going to be really refreshing to see something different.
I am right there alongside you as far as the only thing I've seen is the some of the actors that they've cast, but I don't know who they're playing. I don't
Hmm.
know, like, I've not read beyond the trilogy in The Hobbit. Like, I've not done any of
Oh.
the extended works. I've the only thing I've ever done is go down the Wikipedia rabbit hole of let me click on this. Let me read. Oh, let me click on this, and then starts to get confusing, and I'm like,
Hmm.
I haven't read it, so I don't understand it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
I'm excited that Amazon invested so much money to do because I can't remember how many seasons they've already contractually obligated for, but I know
yeah.
it's more than the one.
Right, right. It's definitely, they're anticipating that it's going to be like a thing, which is good because there's a lot of stuff that they have to work with. But I'm excited too, and especially with Amazon being the benefactor in a sense, the people that are signing up to help make this happen. I'm kind of having like a Jurassic Park vision of like spared no expense. Like, yes, we absolutely invested in making nice props. And yes, we did hire people to make very good armor for our actors. And I think that that effort is going to show up very well on film. So I'm like nervously anticipating it. I'm very excited. It's going to be great. If you do happen to decide to read the expanded works, my biggest recommendation is have like, this is going to sound super nerdy. I had a notebook that I took notes in to keep track of who was who, because there's a lot of people going on, and everyone's related to each other somehow. And if you can just like either print off or take notes while you're reading, that's the biggest way that you can kind of like make it through the onslaught of information that's going to be exposed to your retinas, so to speak.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, just even like the elven names as I'm reading through Wikipedia, I'm like, they sound so familiar.
Right? Yeah, especially when they're like related to each other. They essentially have the same name and there's like three different letters between the two of them. It's so confusing.
But I'm excited. I love Middle Earth, so I'm excited to see what is going to come out next. And yeah, and yeah, hopefully more people get involved and get into the movies, and they still stand up. I watched the extended editions of the trilogy recently, and they still stand up.
I know, I completely agree.
Now we're going to go from fantasy to science fiction, which
Yeah.
fantasy slash sci-fi. I loved hanging out in that part of the library or bookseller back in the day when I was a
hmm
youngin'. But we're going to talk about a series that has also almost, Lord of the Rings has been out for is one of those fandoms that has been out for a long time, and
hmm
this fandom is also one of the longest running fandoms that has been out there, and that is the world or the universe of Star Trek.
Oh yeah.
One of the things I love about Star Trek is there's so many different series, there's so many different like books, uh there's so many different entry points for someone to become a fan of the Star Trek universe. Where did you get your start?
So I actually, I'm a youngin. I was born in '95, so I was born in the age of Next Generation, and my parents used to watch it. So I actually grew up watching Next Generation. I would be plopped on the couch as a little one. I'd have my binky and I'd have my, teddy bear, and we would just be watching, Next Generation. So I grew up watching that series. As I got a little bit older and knew enough about Next Generation, that's when we, kind of harkened back to, well, let's watch the original series just so you can kind of get a sense of like where all of this came from. And then from there, you start to get into, oh, but there's more. You liked that one. Let me introduce you to this one. And then, we gradually progressed through each of the television shows. And as streaming became a thing, I got even deeper into it with watching all the other, iterations of Star Trek. And then the reboots came along. But I think Next Generation is always going to have a special place in my heart because I just remember vividly as a small child sitting on this giant couch in front of the, square, huge TV and having like the stars flying at you and like listening to the theme intro. And it just like, that's a formative part of my childhood is growing up and watching Next Generation.
And that is so awesome to hear. I know as a parent, and with Star Trek not really being on the air when my kids were younger, and not really, I mean, you could stream it on Netflix, sure, but it wasn't like something where we would sit down and watch it. So my kids who are now like in middle school, it was. I've been like, can somebody please watch Star Trek with me? Will no one watch it? And finally, like after much begging and pleading, one of my three has said that they will watch and try it out with me.
One of them caved.
One of them caved. I had them watch Galaxy Quest a couple weeks ago, and they really liked that. And I was like, well, that's kind of what Star Trek is, but a little bit more serious.
Yeah, yeah. It's for grown-ups.
Yes, a little bit. Now, I know when I got into Star Trek, I was introduced to it through like Star Trek Next Generation was on, but I saw it through Star Trek 6 was in the movie theaters,
Oh,
and I saw
okay.
that and then got into Next Generation, and that had been a super cool experience,
Yeah.
of getting into it. Now, Next Generation holds a special place in your heart. Who's your favorite? Who, because that's another, we're talking about these casts of people
Mhm.
who there's so many of them, and it's hard to pick. But
Yeah.
who do you love on that
So I have
series?
two favorites. Number one is definitely Data. He is like without a doubt my favorite Star Trek character ever. I think that especially growing up as a kid, right? A whole 80% of your experience as a child is asking why. Why do humans do that? Why do humans do this? Why do they do that? But why? Like why is like the huge portion of your vocabulary is just asking why. So to see a character on this TV show who is also going through, in a sense, that growing up experience of discovering new portions of human interactions and asking why it is the way it is was very interesting to see as a kid because it's almost validating in a way, right? Like it's normal for me to ask, why do humans do this? Why do humans do that? And it's okay for me to be curious because Data's curious too. And in the end, it makes him a better human in a sense because he's able to ask these inquisitive questions and he's able to kind of explore what it means to be a human who interacts with other humans and has emotional relationships with other humans. And I think that it was really special for me as a child, kind of growing up alongside Data and being able to ask those questions and feel validated and wanting those answers. And then if I had to pick number two, definitely Jordan LaForge. He is so underrated. He's an incredible character. He's not defined by his, quote, vision. How do I want to phrase this? Like he's a blind character, right? But him being blind does not define him as a character. That's just a portion of who he is. I don't think anyone will disagree with me saying that his visor was like the slickest looking thing that anyone's ever worn in this franchise. Everyone wanted a visor like that. It was so cool looking. And even when he got the ocular implants, like the bright blue ocular implants, that looked sweet too. I think he was an amazing character. He was always there to fix things when they went wrong and he always found a solution even when it was like down to the wire. You could always rely on him and he it was just nice to see someone different that wasn't defined by their difference or wasn't just included in the story because he was different. He had his whole own personality and his own character arc, and he was such a special character. And LeVar Burton is also such a wholesome individual. Like he's an angel. Like I don't know if you ever watched Reading Rainbow, but he just like he's got this Mr. Rogers quality to him where I could be having like the worst day ever. And if he told me like it's gonna be okay, tomorrow's gonna be better, I'd be like, you know what, LeVar, you're right. Tomorrow will be better. I'm gonna have some bread, I'm gonna take a deep breath, and I'm gonna try again tomorrow. And I love that about him. And I think that's why I kind of am attached to his character.
Well, I'll start with LeVar first. Is that I definitely grew up. I was the generation of like reading Rainbow.
Yes.
So yes, like butterfly in the sky,
Mm-hmm.
fly so high. Yep, it's in the book Reading Rainbow. Yeah, that was like I am still to this day like a book lover of I want to have the book in my hand. I want to read it. I would love to go places in books, and I fully credit that show for instilling me with like the love of reading.
Absolutely.
And then to go back and forth between Jordy and Data, I love that the two characters that you like favorite are both like so close together as far as character relationships go, as being best friends and
Yes.
having that working relationship with each other, and how Jordy influenced Data, but at the same time Data was influencing Jordy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I love that your parents not only, you started off with Next Gen, but then went back to watch the original series, because I've watched the original series. I don't know if I could watch it again. Like, there's
No, yeah, it's a whole trip, and it's almost like endearing in a way because you watch it and, like I think of like The Trouble with Tribbles. If I were to watch that episode for the first time as a 25-year-old, I would be like, why am I watching this? This is ridiculous. This is a bunch of fuzzballs falling out of the ceiling. Like they couldn't come up with anything else, but like watching it when I was younger, I still had that sense of awe and wonder, and I still wanted to soak up every single minute of it. So I think it was a very tactical move for them to have me watch the original series as a child. Because, like, say if I was like a middle schooler, I would have been like, this is so lame. Like, the effects on this show are just so horrible. That's not an alien, that's a Pomeranian with like, a party hat on its forehead. But you have to kind of watch it not in earnest. You have to kind of know what you're going into. Like, this is a TV show from over 40 years ago. The effects are not awesome. What you're here for is the stories and the concepts. But I'm definitely still glad I watched it. And I do sometimes watch it for the comfort factor of knowing exactly what's happening and like the predictability of like, I know exactly what's going on in this episode. It's definitely endearing, but it's not something you can rewatch a bajillion times, like Next Generation, for example.
right. My rewatch one is Deep Space Nine.
Oh,
Of
yes.
all of them, I just there's something about Deep Space Nine, whether it's the Star Trek factor of like Starfleet or the political and religious stuff that happens
Mm-hmm.
with Bajor and Cardassia,
Mm-hmm.
uh, the wormhole on the other side, and the conflicts that they get into, and things that you had never seen in a Star Trek show, like having a fleet of ships, like all of a sudden, like an armada of ships across like the Federation, the Cardassians, and I think it's like the Klingons or the Romulans, and
Mm-hmm.
just having that whole massive space battle. Like you've never seen anything like that.
I know. And I feel like almost to their detriment sometimes with the original series and even with Next Generation, there was only so much they could do, and sometimes it made the Star Trek universe feel kind of small, maybe not small but consistent. And I feel like the one thing that Deep Space Nine did really well is they made the Star Trek universe feel so infinite. Like there were infinite possibilities, infinite adventures. There are so many life forms out there that we're not even talking about right now. We're just showing you guys a sliver. And it added this really exciting factor to Deep Space Nine that I don't think we'd gotten to see in other shows. And it gave it this more unique vibe that you still feel today, even with going back and rewatching it. It just feels more like you're on the edge of your seat. Like, what are they going to show me next?
Absolutely. I remember reading an interview with somebody from Star Trek Next Generation. I think it might have been Patrick Stewart, or it might have been one of the directors. And they said in the early seasons of Star Trek, when Gene Roddenberry was still around, is that everything had to be like none of the characters had problems. There was no like never any conflict between the characters. And they're like, this isn't going to make for an entertaining show. We need to have conflict. There needs to be problems. There needs to be things that aren't just like everything's hunky dory right now. And I think that's why it took until like the mid second season or even third season for Next Generation for it to be really like, okay, here we go. Like we're actually getting into more of that like expansion and conflict and characters where they have problems and not getting it resolved right away.
Yeah, totally. And I think that to that same end too, I almost don't even want to say that like Gene was wrong for not, arguing that the characters should just get along and just interact with the quote problems that they interact with per episode. But one thing that was really special about the original series that the subsequent iterations have done a really good job of upholding is at its core, even though there's individuals that have their own interpersonal relationships within the Federation and within, other species that they interact with, Star Trek is about how you can't possibly advance as a species until you learn to accept that there are differences, that people are different and those differences are special. And we're at our most powerful and our most efficient when we use those differences to work together. And each Star Trek iteration has done such an amazing job of showing this crew that is a conglomerate of so many different kinds of people with so many different kinds of talents. And the only way that they're able to encounter and overcome the obstacles that they do is because they're so different and because they work well together. And all these different characters have different episodes where their strengths and weaknesses come out, and their strengths help the crew in their own special way. And in each TV show and each movie, they've done such a good job of showing each of these different characters being very different from one another, but also having their own moment to shine. And I think that's like the most special thing about them, because even if there isn't interpersonal conflict on the ship, you still get to see each character for the individual that they are, and show, the show shows that these individuals do matter in the grand scheme of things. And that's like one of my favorite things about the TV show. I think if I had to like, write a whole dissertation on it, which I easily could if I had the time, that would totally be the thesis.
That's awesome. And I love you explained it way better than even I could venture to do it. Like, thank you for that.
Thank you. I think about it a lot.
Now, there's been a number of Star Trek shows, Star Trek movies. Have you seen everything? Are you lacking in stuff? Like, I know personally, like, I stopped at Enterprise, so I haven't seen any of Enterprise. I haven't seen Discovery. I haven't seen Picard. But I've seen the movies, so I'm good on the movies.
Okay. So I have seen everything so far except for the new season of Discovery, because I am very bad at waiting between episodes. It causes me an abnormal amount of stress. Me trying to make it through The Mandalorian right now is like I'm on the verge of like a breakout on my face from last week's episode. Like I am so bad at waiting between episodes. So what I'm doing is I'm waiting until this newer season of Discovery finishes so that I can sit in my little bedroom hole, wrap myself in a blanket burrito, march through all 10 episodes, and finish my day knowing that I know exactly what happened this season. There are some iterations where I can only make it through once. As much as I love Star Trek, I am not a huge fan of Star Trek Enterprise. Can't put my finger on it. It's just not one of my favorites. I watched it once through. Can't say I paid the best attention to it. It was kind of one of those, like, I'm going to watch it while I'm doing homework kind of things. So I experienced it, but I wasn't like glued to the screen and memorizing every single line. But I have to date, with the exception of the newest season of Discovery, seen every iteration that has come out so far.
Okay. As a Star Trek fan, do you like the Star Trek reboot movies? Like,
Yes.
where do you fall in that?
Oh my God. Okay. So I know that it's a little divisive. I personally love the reboot movies. I think that if there's two people on planet Earth that I would trust with reboots, it's J.J. Abrams and Jon Favreau. I think that they do a really good job of recognizing the emotions that were elicited when something first came out and replicating that with new material, right? So if you think back to when the original series first came out, it was so groundbreaking and it was so exciting to watch because it was so different. And I think that in the first reboot movies and the subsequent ones, J.J. Abrams, at least in the first movie, did a really, really good job of making Star Trek look shiny and new and different and exciting again, and generating that same hype. Like when you first see the bridge of the Enterprise, in the first Star Trek reboot movie, and it's all shiny and everything's white and there's lens flares. It's just like it's like a kid in a candy shop. Like your eyes get so wide and you're like, whoa, this is beautiful, And when you're looking at the original series, The Bridge of the Enterprise, it's like it looks like everything's made of cardboard. But back then, when people were watching it, they were like, wow, this is so cool, So I think that people sometimes fall into the trap of being purists and being like, well, this isn't the original Spock and this isn't the original Kirk. But I think if you're trying to appreciate it for how it's trying to make you feel, and that's why those stylistic choices were made, you come to appreciate it more as an individual iteration rather than a remake, because it isn't a carbon copy. They did a good job of coming up with a different storyline, and there's the whole thing with the Romulans, and they tried really hard to make it a reboot but not a remake. And I
Hmm.
think that, at least in my opinion, which is by no means the gospel truth, I think they did a pretty good job of you know doing some sort of reboot that elicits the same emotion and energy and hype that the original series did. So I love the reboot movies, but I also have a very strong emotional attachment to Zach, who played Spock, because I used to watch Heroes, and he
Yes.
was in Heroes as Siler, and I loved that show. So when I heard he was playing Spock, I was like, all right, I'm in. So I have like a very, very strong emotional attachment to Zachary Quinto. So I may be slightly biased, but
Yes. I'll hit Heroes first, and then I'll go back to the movies.
yes.
We in this household, my wife and I, we watched the first season of Heroes, and we are like, "This is awesome! I
Hmm.
can't wait until they team up in the second season and they're together." And they're learning about each other, and then it's like second season comes, like, what's going on? Why
Yeah,
aren't they together?
it got so chaotic.
Yeah, I think I don't even know if we made it through
Mm,
like we watched the series, but then it kind of like fell off. And
yeah, it
I
did.
know I tried to watch like not the reboot, but like the sequel series, and
Mm,
I stopped after a little bit. But yeah, like as far as the JJ movies go, like I loved the first one.
hmm.
I wasn't much of a fan of the Khan one, the second one, but then I
Okay.
loved Star Trek Beyond. Like
Yes.
that one, I thought that was really fun, and I was looking forward to seeing what they were going to do with the next movie. But I guess there's not a next movie, and then I've heard rumors of like who's going to direct another movie, and I
Hmm.
don't know.
Yeah, I think the whole thing with making another one is they wholly intention to, but then there was the accident with Anton,
Oh
the
yes,
one that played
yes.
Chekhov, and I think
Mhm.
that he was such an integral part of that cast, and they were all so close that it's almost unfair to ask them to come back to do another one, because there's just going to be this glaring absence. So I think that the development of another movie has just kind of been sitting in the ether since then, because no one wants to be like, hey guys, like, want to come back for round four? I know you're still mourning, but like the people need you. So
Right.
I don't think that we're going to get another one. So I'm just going to appreciate the three that we have. But to that same end, they're also doing a lot with like Star Trek Picard. And there's talk of, I know you said you haven't seen Discovery yet, but Spock and Pike do make an appearance on Discovery. And the guy that played Pike actually did like an amazing job. And there's talk of him getting his own spinoff. So I think that just because they're not making more reboot movies doesn't mean that we're going to be thirsting for additional refreshed content for the rest of forever. Um, but if I can advocate for anyone to go watch Star Trek Discovery, please take my word for it. As long as you can get through the first three episodes, I promise it'll be worth your time. It's the first three episodes kind of have a weird vibe. A lot of people weren't crazy about it, but it's worth the time investment.
Okay, well that's good to know because it is on my list. I do have CBS All Access, I think it's
Mm-hmm.
called, which well I'll end the Star Trek talk here is that I I honestly believe that Star Trek needs to be a show that's on TV for everyone to watch instead
Yes.
of being behind a paywall. And that is the hill that I will die on, is that we need to have a Star Trek even if there's like a couple year break in between them. I really feel that there should be a Star Trek series running almost at all time in our lifetime on TV for everyone to experience.
You won't be dying on that hill alone. I'll be up there with you. I absolutely endorse this opinion. I think that there's so many amazing concepts and stories that you can tell through Star Trek that more people should have access to it. And this rush to get everything on streaming is depriving the general populace of this amazing IP. So I agree with you in that regard.
Well, yeah, I'm glad I'm not going to die on that hill alone
You
then.
won't.
Now, for before we get to talk about cosplay, there's one final fandom that we're going to talk about, and it's kind of a merged one at this point because jokingly back in the day I was like, oh, Disney's going to own everything, and now here we are. Disney owns like Disney and Marvel and Star Wars, and they own Pixar. They
Yeah,
got
they literally own everything.
exactly. And so you had said that you're into Disney and Marvel. Where
Mhm.
do you fall? What do you love? What do you want to talk about in this giant behemoth of a company?
I mean, so I'll talk about any and all of it. I love all of it. Not crazy about the company as an entity. The brand, however, I'll, love them until the end of days. I love all of the movies they make. I love all of the TV shows. I love everything that Marvel has made so far. I'm loving everything that I'm seeing so far of Marvel Phase 2. Um, so I'll talk wherever the conversation takes us because I'm a huge fan of all of it.
Well, let's touch on something you said
Mm.
earlier with who you would trust for a franchise. And in fact, I commented today, which on recording day, is that you had put something in your Instagram about John Favreau,
I did,
and
yes.
I want to just mention that you are absolutely correct as far as I don't know if he's like a miracle worker or something, but
Yeah,
between what he did to kickstart the Marvel movie franchise and what he has done to, honest to goodness, on some level save Star
revive. Yeah,
Wars.
absolutely.
I see. I'm not going to say revive. I'm going to go with save
Okay, I'll take it.
because of what happened with the sequel trilogy is they didn't have a plan,
Oh my
and
god. Yes.
they didn't have some overarching storyline to go through the three movies. But here you have a man, like a guy who it cracks me up if you go back and look at his like his like movies that he's in. Like he's in Swingers and he's in like all these zany movies, and now here
Yeah,
he is busting out like this great super arc with between him and Dave Filoni with the Mandalorian. It's like, oh my
yeah,
gosh, like he has done so much for two different like major properties.
yeah. He's really kind of like a renaissance man, and he's had his golden fingers in so many different kinds of movies and IPs, and he can act too. So it's like he's essentially a triple threat because he played Happy in all the Iron Man movies and he was hilarious. He was like one of the funniest characters, but he truly is like the fix it Felix of directing. And I don't know, it's just like this innate talent that he has. And not to name names, prequel trilogy, but he's very good at coming up with a plan before he steps foot into something so that as you move through his plan, you start to see things connect. And that makes the satisfaction of making it through, the next episode or the next movie, it keeps you hanging on for more because you want to see where that story continues to take you. And it's satisfying to see those pieces come together.
Now, I guess let's stick with Marvel for now.
Okay.
Um, favorite Marvel movie, favorite Marvel character, like where do you fall in the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
Oof, unfair question.
I know,
I
I know.
because there's so many to choose from. I think if we had to talk about, so let me pick a couple different favorites. I think the funniest ones are the Ant-Man movies. Do I think that they're the most well made or the best stories? No, but I think that the Ant-Man movies are the funniest. I think that Iron Man is probably up there as one of my favorite characters just because of his personal development. I'm trying to think. I really enjoy Mark Ruffalo as the Hulk. He just like he warms the cockles of my heart. He's just such a nice man. He comes across as just like this small nerd, and then he gets angry, and he's not small, and he's not a nerd, and he just does like such a great job at portraying the duality that is Bruce Banner. I love the Science Bros. I love seeing like Bruce Banner and Tony Stark interact. That's one of my favorite interactions. Um, I don't know if I have like a favorite movie. Maybe if I had to pick one, like the first Avengers movie, because seeing all of these characters that had been set up in their own little side movies finally come together was it almost felt like a little groundbreaking in a way, because I don't know if we'd ever seen characters from all these separate blockbusters come together for this one ginormous mega blockbuster and do it so well. So maybe just in terms of original impact, the first Avengers movie was really awesome. Um, the last two Avengers movies were incredibly stressful. So even though I love them, I remember I like left Endgame and like, went to the bathroom to like wash my hands because my hands were so sweaty from being so clenched. And I looked down at my Apple Watch and my heart rate was like 120 just from like literally being on the edge of my seat the entire movie. Like I was so stressed. But that one moment where Thor is laying there and he's about to like totally get nixed by Thanos, and you see the hammer fly by and the camera pans up and it's Captain America holding the hammer. It was one of the most pure, like simultaneous human experiences of elation that I've ever seen. And I don't like it's better than like someone getting like a last minute touchdown to win a football game. Like the number of people that were like standing up and screaming and cheering. And then, you would go to see the movie for, however many weekends after it came out. And during that scene, without fail, people would lose it at that one shot of Captain America holding the hammer. And it was just like, it was so fun to watch that scene. And that was one of my favorite like experiences within the MCU, was experiencing that scene in the movie theater with other people, because it was just so wholesome and everyone was so happy and so excited. Like, did you see it in the theater?
Oh, absolutely.
So you know what I'm talking about. Like it was pure ecstasy just seeing him like standing there holding it and just fighting with it. And oh my God, I lost it.
It is one of those things, and it happens because I'm on Twitter a lot, and it goes without saying that every couple months somebody posts the YouTube link to one of the theaters that
Yes.
recorded it, and just the amount of like electricity and just that
Yeah.
togetherness, and like I can't believe we're witnessing what we're seeing on screen, and if it was like this huge release
Mhm.
of just energy and outpouring of like emotion. And then the same thing is when like when he's standing there, Cap is standing there, and then you hear Sam's voice over uh the earpiece, and he's like, can you hear me? And then all of a sudden you see like
Yeah.
everybody come.
All the
It's like
portals start opening up.
yes.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. So good.
It is so good. Now, sticking with Marvel just for a second, like obviously, the year that we're recording in, which is 2020, is the first year in 10 years where nothing Marvel came out. We didn't have any Marvel movies. The Marvel TV series that we were supposed to get also got pushed back until next year. Um, What are you most looking forward to, either on the movie or TV side of things, of what Marvel is getting ready to do?
So I'm actually really excited for phase two because I think that we've had the same characters for so long that it's almost kind of the norm now. Like Captain America is just like the norm, you know what I mean? But there are so many other characters within, like, the next generation of Avengers that we're going to get to see. So, for example, I recently saw on Instagram that they started filming the new Hawkeye series, and Haley Steinfeld, who's like one of my favorite actresses, she's actually going to play Kate Bishop. And there's this one Instagram account that I just started following that's been showing like behind the scenes pictures of filming the Hawkeye TV series. And I've actually read some of the comics that have Kate Bishop in them. I think she's a great character. But my favorite thing was seeing that there is someone within the costume department or someone within storyboarding who is a purist who has gone back through and read all the Kate Bishop materials and has dressed Haley Steinfeld in a bunch of outfits that Kate Bishop wore in the comics. So what I'm really excited for is that if they're showing that attention to detail, I think that just shows that there are people behind this series that really care about the content that they're putting together. And anytime you have people that are that passionate about, going back and looking at the original materials and making sure that the viewers who have known Kate Bishop for a long time know that the people that brought her to the screen care about her the same way we do, it always ends up being, a really pleasurable experience because the quality is just that much further heightened when someone pays attention to the pillars of that character and they know exactly where that character is coming from and they can direct the show to make sure that they're honoring who the character is and has been. And I think that especially with phase two, it's just going to be exciting to see these new characters come to life in each of their own movies, and then when they finally come together for their Avengers style movie, I think that's going to be really exciting.
It is. I did see some of the behind the scenes pictures of at least like her Hawkeye outfit, and I was like, that is extremely close to what I remember seeing in the comics. And I know that there had been talk, of course, because there's always talk of what they could be doing. I mean, they've announced like a bajillion different movies that they're going to be working on. But I like that because of the 5 year time jump, that Scott Lang's daughter, Cassie,
Mm,
has the potential to become her young Avenger self as Stature. Uh,
yes.
and like I'm like, okay, we get her. We have Kate Bishop. And then it just like is like those little pieces of, well, what could we get next, and where
Mhm.
would we find it? And I'm really hyped for all that.
Yeah, it's almost like breadcrumbs. Like you're starting to see a vision, but it's from, really far away. You're starting to see little pieces that they're tacking in there and that they're kind of hinting at what their next plan is, but we're all just kind of waiting with bated breath to see how it like, develops into its own kind of conglomerate, and I'm so excited for it. I can't wait.
And now on the flip side, you love Disney.
Yes.
There's way too much for me to ask of you, like a
Yes.
favorite movie or favorite character. Um, I do, out of curiosity, are you more of a traditional like Disney animated, or are you more of a like Pixar animated type of person?
I would say probably more traditional. And believe it or not, I do actually have an answer to you. What is your favorite question? Um, my favorite Disney movie is Treasure Planet. I think that movie is incredibly underrated. I think not enough people have seen it. I think it's like a beautiful blend of two different kinds of animation. I don't know if you've seen it, but
I
it's
have.
okay. You know what I'm talking about then, right? So, for example, with the map is animated differently than the rest of the hand drawn stuff, or the ship that they're on, that's animated differently. But or Silver, for example, that whole bionic arm that he has, it's animated differently than the hand drawn everything else that's in that movie. And Treasure Planet came out at this really weird time where it was the early 2000s, and everyone was like, should we animate it? I feel like it'll look cool. And then it aged horribly. um but Treasure Planet didn't. And I think that that's so special that they were able to figure out how to blend those two mediums because it was so hard to do. And I think it's cool that they took a really old story and totally updated it and made it endearing in their own way. The creativity that went into it was like insane. It doesn't get nearly as much love as it should. But I also am like kind of not wanting to advertise it too much because I feel like it's like my little secret. Like I don't want people to know about it because it's like it's so precious to me and I don't want people to like, I don't know. I don't want to share it. It's my own, my precious. But also like people should watch it. It's really good.
Now, because you named it and you brought it out, I've got to find out your feelings on another, the one that I love tremendously, and I feel it's super underrated, similar to Treasure Planet.
Yes.
Is what are your feelings on Atlantis?
Oh my God. Same thing. Same thing. So underrated. Let's talk first. Okay. There have been so many live action remakes of Disney movies lately. It's almost making me nauseous. If they had to pick two movies that would translate flawlessly to being an in-person movie, I think Treasure Planet and Atlantis would be perfect as live action movies. I think that Atlantis is also vastly underrated. It's such a cool concept. It's so different. And the character design is awesome. Each of the different characters are like so funny in their own right. Like Mole, the little French guy, and Sweet, the doctor, the two of them, their relationship kills me. I think it's so funny. Like those two characters interacting, like it just, they're just like so different and it's so refreshing. And I think they also did that same thing where they were able to blend those two different kinds of animation because the speeder bike type things that they have in Atlantis, those are a different type of animation than everything else that's hand drawn. And they also, you know, had that movie come out in a weird spot in 2000 where they had access to very primitive animating tools and they somehow found a way to use it but not abuse it. And it's definitely in league with Treasure Planet in terms of design, story, and underratedness.
I am right there with you, and I feel because like steampunk now is such a huge thing
Mm-hmm.
in media, whether it's books or cosplay or movies and all these things. And I'm like, Atlantis would be the perfect vehicle to have that like gritty, like not, and I'm not saying dark,
Mm-hmm.
but like that gritty, like just there's something about it. And then those like the wide vast of characters that they had, and I have to give it the special mention to like the voice actors who brought them to life.
Mm-hmm.
It is so incredible to watch. And then you have Kita, who I feel is one of like Kita and Esmeralda and Meg are like three of those characters who don't get enough love on the women side of things of Disney
Not
as
nearly
far as
enough.
representation and like you don't see a lot of like there's no action figures, there's no dolls, there's no dress up. Like it doesn't really exist. And it's like you have Kita who ends the movie as queen, but it's not like they're having a coronation ceremony. It's not like she's getting married off to my like they're just starting out their relationship, but here
Mm-hmm.
she is like she has saved her kingdom and here like it's I don't know. I have no words right now.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. It's almost like you start to think about it so much and there's so much love and appreciation that your brain just turns to mush because it's like, don't you guys see how amazing this is? Don't you guys see what I'm seeing? And especially Kita, like if you want to talk about like strong female characters, she's perfect. She's a great strong female character because, she knows who she is. She totally wants to get to know Milo, but without compromising what her people and what her city needs of her. She goes through that whole experience of like meeting people from the outside world for the first time. And then she loses her father, but she's still able to like rise above both of those problems, rescue her people, and then ascend to the throne. Like, name another woman that could do that in the span of 5 days like she did. Like she's an animal. I don't know how she does it. She's just so cool. And then there's the whole backstory of her losing her mom, and there's the whole story of Milo always having this dream of finding Atlantis. And then he finally, like, as an adult, he's hitting this rough patch in his life only to find out, like, there's adventure just around the corner and it's just kicking in for you. And there's hope. You get to do this thing that you've wanted to do for so long. And it's so amazing. And I'm right there with you. It gives me like brain mush just thinking about it.
And of course, I mentioned the voice actors, and I'm going to tie it back. Leonard Nimoy as
Hmm.
Kita's father, Star Trek. There we go. Enough
Yes,
said.
exactly, exactly. And then you have Michael J. Fox playing Milo, who
Yes.
is an actual angel. We all love Michael J. Fox. He was so perfect playing Milo, like doing the little stuttering that he added into the lines. It's just and who would have known that he was such a great voice actor? Because obviously we know, he's a classic actor from the 80s, but seeing him take on voice acting was so different. But he did it so well. Just everyone did in that movie.
Absolutely. Now with Disney, of course, there's too much to name as to like things that are coming up. Is there anything particular that you're looking forward to coming out of the Disney side of things?
Hmm.
Like I'll know that I'll put it out there. The new animated movie that they're doing, Raya, the Last Dragon,
Oh,
I think.
yeah,
Like that
yeah.
looks really
It
cool.
does look really cool, and I know that they released a teaser trailer from it about a month or so ago, and that did look really, really good, and I'm interested to see what they do with that. I'm also interested to see what ends up happening with that new Pixar movie, Soul. Because I know that for a while they were kind of releasing materials and trying to drum up um, hubbub about it and get people excited. And it kind of faded away for a little bit. And I feel like people aren't really talking about it anymore. So I don't know where it went or what's happening with it or what the plan is. And I actually forgot that it was even on the roster to come out until I was Christmas shopping and I saw like a pop figure for one of the characters from the movie. And then I was like, oh my God, I forgot that was supposed to be a thing. So I don't know if that one's still coming out. Um, I'll have to look into it, but
Well, just to jump in, it is coming out. For
mhm.
people that are listening to this, it'll most likely be out by now. It's going straight to Disney Plus.
Oh, are they gonna do that thing where they did with Mulan where they charge you to watch it, or is it just
No, it's going to be just like Onward and Hamilton. It's just going to be straight up on the Disney Plus side of things.
that's good. I'm glad it's been resuscitated and there's a plan to get it to the masses because Pixar is always so good about, coming up with stories that hit you in a way you didn't think they were going to. So I think that's going to be another one that'll be good to watch too. I'm looking forward to seeing the title pop up online.
Now, we're here, and I found you on Instagram
Hmm.
because I when I originally started the podcast, I was like, who can I talk to about fandoms besides like just trying to ask people randomly, like, hey, you want to talk to me about podcast stuff? And I said, I bet there's cosplayers on Instagram, and they sink heart, blood, sweat, tears, and money into what they do, and they might want to talk to me about things that they dress up in. And so that is how I came across you and your wonderful cosplay that I've enjoyed, seeing over the past year. How did you get into cosplay? Like where did you like how did you decide to jump into that swimming pool of just creativity?
Yeah, so it's weird. I actually didn't get into it until I was in college. So we having gone to the University of Central Florida, lived very close to Disney. And I, at one point, went there with one of my friends who was very blonde. And if you've seen my hair is kind of like an auburn. And we were there, and someone in line commented and said, like, oh, you guys kind of look like Elsa and Anna. And I was like, oh, yeah, we kind of do. And then I looked at her and I go, should we make those costumes? And she was like, yeah. So that's kind of how I started getting into it. Anna was the first costume I made. And then from there, I got involved with this amazing group called Costumers with a Cause. It was a volunteer group of a bunch of cosplayers who dress up as princes, princesses, movie characters, superheroes. And they go to a bunch of fundraiser events all throughout Central and Southern Florida. And then through that company, I started to expand with, how many costumes I was making. We got into doing hospital visits to visit sick kids. They got involved with Give Kids the World. But then I graduated and I left Florida. And then I end up back in Boston, where I'm from, and I have no community anymore. Like, I didn't know anyone that did this costuming thing. I start wondering to myself, like, maybe this is just a Florida thing. Like, am I going to find kin up here? Little did I know, it is absolutely a thing everywhere, much to my, elation. And so I went to a convention the summer after I graduated college and moved home. And it was like the first convention I'd ever been to, and it was life changing. Like, I could not get enough. I was there from sun up to sundown, like a full Disney parks day. I thought my feet were going to fall off. I was tired. I was hungry, but I was so happy. And I met so many people, and they kept asking, like, do you have an Instagram page? And I didn't want to give out my personal Instagram page because I don't know these people like personally yet. So at that point, I was like, you know what? I need to do what everyone else is doing because peer pressure, and I need to set up a page where I can connect to these people within this community, because this is definitely something that I like. And as I'm going to these conventions and meeting these people, they're inspiring me to make more things. And I'm just like so eager to meet more people and get that connection and almost kind of like chase that high again of being on a con floor and everyone else is dressed up in this thing that, like you said, they poured blood, sweat, and tears into. And to be there and be interacting with people, and you walk up to someone and you say, oh my God, this cosplay is absolutely amazing. Can I please take a picture with you? You look so good. And then they're like, yours is great too. How did you make it? You start to share stories about, the trials and tribulations of trying to figure out how to do this stupid pair of boots. And I tried like 5 different times and nothing was working. I just ordered it on Amazon. You see all these people that make these like crazy armor builds out of foam, and it's just like, you are so talented and I aspire to be able to do that. And it's this amazing hobby where, for the most part, I feel like you see other people's creativity and it inspires you to do more and do better, which I think is beautiful. I think that for the most part there isn't too terribly much competition or aggressiveness, at least with the people I interact with. It's very supportive. There's a lot of encouragement, and it's just so nice to see people sharing what they're making, support what they're making, and have that reciprocated as well. It's a very fulfilling hobby to be involved in, and I have loved every minute of it ever since I got into it.
I have to say, there, like, one of the things doing the podcast and getting to talk to people who cosplay, whether it's the creativity in the costumes, like the sewing and busting that type of thing out, or the prop making, the photography side of stuff, and how the cosplayer and photographer work together to get like what it essentially is a piece of art,
Mm,
whether it's the costume or the photo. Like, it is astounding what people are able to do. Like,
right?
I told somebody the other day, I said, I do not understand how you can go to Joanne's Fabrics, pick up some material and turn it into what you have. Like,
Hmm.
it blows my mind just that is something that people are able to do at their house with.
Yeah.
And it's literally just something that is so impressive to me. Now for you, like, as far as characters that you decide to cosplay, how do you arrive at, I'm going to do this person? Is it more of a, you connect to the character? Is it more that you're looking at the costume and you're like, I can pull that off, like I can do that outfit? Or is it a combination of both? Like, where do you go from there?
I think it's probably a little bit of both. So for example, one character that I really identify with is Astrid. Like, I love Astrid from How to Train Your Dragon. I empathize with her. I identify with her. She's like one of my favorite characters. I love her spunkiness. So watching, any of those movies or the TV shows, I'm like, I need to make that because she and I are kin, and I need to make that Viking costume. Like, it's like a compulsion. But then you have other characters like Azula. I don't think I'm very much like Azula. I don't really identify with her homicidal nature, but her outfit is sharp as hell and looked like a lot of fun to make. So I went ahead and I made a Azula costume and I made a Zuko costume for my friends. So even though that wasn't something where I was like, I really identify with Azula's inability to form human connections with other people and her violent nature, it was more so just that would look sick as a photo shoot. And I'm going to find another friend of mine who also thinks it would look sick, and we're going to have a fun time doing it.
Absolutely. And I saw your Azula cosplay and I was like, oh my gosh, like it's between the craftsmanship of the costume, but also like I don't know who did your photo editing.
Yeah, it was Amy Photos. She's a literal angel. She's so talented.
Yeah, it is so good. I mean, and of course you also have a Katara cosplay, and I'm like, oh yeah, Avatar Universe.
Yeah, it's so good. It's like one of my favorite TV shows.
It is. It's a wonderful show. With cosplay comes the default question of like, do you have a favorite? And I know you've been doing it for a few years now, but do you have one that you look back on fondly and you're like, this is who I identify with, or is it just that you enjoy rotating through the characters?
I think if I had to pick two characters that I like really identify with, it'd probably be Astrid and Katara. I feel like I'm halfway between those two. Um, but I think if I had to pick the most fun one that I have done, believe it or not, it was actually one that literally only cost me like probably $30. Last summer, my friends and I did a Neverland group, and I went as Peter Pan. And the whole day we were at this convention, no one knew that I was a girl, which was like kind of fun because I was kind of anonymous. Like, I did not look like myself at all. I saw a bunch of my friends in the hall and no one recognized me. And it was cool because normally, when I put on a costume, like it still looks like me. But for whatever reason, like the short hair and the strong brows, like I was a totally different human. And that was probably the most fun one that I think I've done, just because it was exciting to do something so different. And I'd never done like a crossplay before. So I think that's probably like the more fun one I've did. But if I had to pick a favorite, it's probably Katara or Astrid.
What's your favorite thing to do? But like prior, obviously, like once you get the cosplay completed, like that's the best thing. But what do you love like on that lead up? Is it like sourcing the materials? Is it trying to like pattern work? Is it, cursing at your sewing machine? Like what's your favorite part of the crafting experience?
I think probably sourcing materials because I don't pattern. I just kind of like BS my way through it until it works out. But my favorite thing as a young individual, I don't have unlimited funds, so I try to ball on a budget, so to speak. I will go to every Savers within like a 10-mile radius of my apartment, and I will try to find as many pieces as I can that are thrifted, just because it's kind of an expensive hobby. And if you really want to get into it, it can be a little bit wasteful if you're not reusing these things that you're making. So, my kind of millennial way around that wastefulness is I try to find as many things as I can that can be repurposed into, portions of the costume. So, for example, I'm trying to think, like for Astrid, both skirts that I have, like both the outer layer and the underneath layer, those were both portions, like they were cut up portions from skirts that I got at Savers. Same thing with the boots and the leggings and the shirt. I think the only thing that I spent money on was foam to make like the shoulder pieces. I think that it's exciting because it kind of feels like a safari slash treasure hunt, like walking into the endless rows of clothing at Savers and being like, ooh boy, what am I going to find today? And sometimes it's even exciting to go in there, like not even having an idea of what I want to make, right? Like if I'm just like, I need to make something this weekend or I'm going to lose my mind. And then you walk into Savers and you peruse the racks and you find this one piece and your brain goes, oh my God, that would be so perfect as blah, blah, blah. And you think to yourself, wait, yes, this would absolutely work. I need to go back to the vests and see if they have vests. And then I need to check the shoes and I need to check the tablecloth section to see if they have extra fabric that I can use for a skirt. It just like sometimes you end up being so deep into the thrifting that it inspires a whole different project. And then you end up like me, where I have a list of like projects that's, 30 projects long and everything's like 60% done, but it just needs like one more thrifting trip before I'm done with it. But that's probably the most fun because the possibilities are endless and it's just there's so much momentum behind it.
Now, 2020 is a weird year. A lot of
Mm.
conventions this year had to obviously cancel, and as we're recording this, looking forward to 2021. I some of the conventions have already canceled. Some have pushed their dates back to summer or even later. However, that doesn't really stop people from crafting and creating. So I'm curious to know, like, what is on your plans? Like, what would you love to finish in 2021?
Hmm. This is a good question. There's a couple things that I have that are and have been in progress for a while. One of them is Susan Pevensey from the Narnia movies. I actually, over the summer, when we were like, peak COVID craziness, and the hospital that I work at was like totally trying to get its stuff back on track in the midst of all the chaos, and it was super stressful. I made a bunch of her costume from the second movie, and I just like haven't gotten around to finishing it, but I've put so much time and energy into it and it's so detailed that I know if I took the time and actually finished it, I'd be really really proud of how it turned out. But I don't want to post any updates of how it looks so far because it's just not done yet. That's on the list for finishing. I think after seeing the teaser shots from the Hawkeye show, I've added Kate Bishop to the list because she's just amazing. Um, Maybe Astrid's wedding dress has been on my list for a little while, but I want to shoot that out in the snow. Ooh, one other thing I'm really excited for is I want to do Ahsoka Tano because one of my Instagram friends does a Mandalorian costume that looks really, really good. And one thing we want to do after the holidays is do a photo shoot that kind of recreates the scene from The Mandalorian where the two of them interact. So that's the project that I'm working on right now. And I'm really, really motivated to get that one done. So that's probably going to be the first one that I do at the beginning of next year.
Awesome. Those all sound like things I am ready to see once you obviously get through them and get
Yes.
some pictures and stuff. But I always love seeing the work that you do. I love scrolling. I enjoyed scrolling back. I was like, man, there's a lot of stuff that I had not seen because
Yeah.
obviously I followed you at a certain point and then went forward. But one of the things I love to do is go back just to see the different like fandoms that you're into and
Mm-hmm.
the costumes. And I'm excited to see what you've got for the coming year. And of course, Ahsoka is so awesome. So
She's the
I'm
best.
thrilled with that. So Ellie, we have reached the end of the episode.
We made it.
We made it, and we went long. So thank you so much for willingness to go further and beyond with the wonderful talks that we had about what you enjoy.
Yes. Thank you for having me. It was fun to talk nerd for a few minutes with a fellow human.
Absolutely. Now, for those people who have made it this far with us and want to find out where they can find you, where's the best place on the internet to do so?
Definitely on Instagram. My page is EG.Cosplay. I do have a TikTok. I'll be completely honest. I haven't posted on it in months because I don't really have the time to consistently post on it. If you want to go over there, you can. But if you're looking for where I'm active, it's definitely on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, I will have the link in the show notes and on our Facebook page and website. And Ellie, I am so thrilled to have been able to talk with you today. And thank you so much for sharing your stories.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Tales from the Fandom. Subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Tales from the Fandom to see photos, links, leave feedback, and check out upcoming guests. If you'd like to be a guest, email David at talesfromthefandom@gmail.com.